You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll, it's Holy Joe Rock and Roll. You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll, it's Holy Joe Rock and Roll.
Hey, what up everybody? Holy Joe Rock here, coming at you live.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
I had
it's not just rock and roll,
do some reviews.
It's Holy Joe,
and it's just part of my
rock and roll
ongoing activity to help defund Hollywood. Now, most of these movies that we're going to review today are actually from 2017, late 2017. Some of them are actually from 2018, just released.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
As it is with
it's
a lot
not
of
just
today,
rock and roll. It's Holy Joe.
Let's bring the
Rock
screen up.
and Roll.
Bubba, bring the screen up. And let's get into it. So, what we're looking at over here, over my right shoulder, is
you're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Now, if you can hear a little server noise in the background,
it's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe.
And that's the way I would recommend
you
running it: is build yourself a free NAS system if you have the time and it doesn't need not even the money, because you can buy a used server and build one. Let's not get into that. I don't want to digress, but that's how I got it running. So if you hear a little bit of
you're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
In my data center here,
it's not just rock and roll.
But having said that,
it's Holy Joe Rock and
I
Roll.
Think where we left off in November of 2017 was, I believe it was Brave New World. Okay, so that brings us to, and I hope I remember that correctly. I did a quick peek.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Obviously, that's the old movie.
It's not just rock and roll.
I highly recommend you see Brave.
It's Holy Joe. Now, rock and roll.
Blade Runner, the new Blade Runner, is what I got next, and that's the Blade Runner 2049. Came out in late 2017, or sometime in 2017. Anyhow,
you're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Potentially,
it's not just rock and roll.
December?
It's Holy Joe.
I didn't get
rock and roll.
Any reviews? So look, Blade Runner 2049. I thought was okay. I thought it was okay. The whole. I mean, it was just okay.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
I found it also.
It's not just rock and roll.
I forgot,
it's Holy Joe.
The general gist of it, but
rock and roll.
I forgot what it was about. And anyway, it's good to watch the original from 1982, and then watch the new version.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
I kind of give it.
It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe.
Yeah, whatever.
Rock and roll.
I guess the story could have maybe been written better, but otherwise it's okay. Now, 3 Billboards. This is an intense movie. I don't know if you would call it a drama.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
It's supposed to be taking place in the South, probably.
It's not just rock and roll.
Where
it's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
Missouri. Outside of Missouri, so I'm not sure. Missouri does poke into the South, and of course, whatever. Look at the map. You can see where Missouri is situated in sort of the center of the country.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Okay,
it's not just rock and roll.
This is actually a really
it's
good
Holy Joe.
3 Billboards.
Rock and roll.
As you see here, a grieving mother whose daughter was, raped, burnt to death, killed. She buys 3 billboards to, in a way, embarrass the.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Okay.
It's not just rock and roll.
And it's
Holy
really
Joe.
Intense drama, a lot of twists
rock
and turns,
and roll.
And yeah, a lot of twists and turns. Okay, and it's worth seeing. Okay. What's next? I wish I could just click through differently, but Jumanji, 2017 Jumanji.
You're
with The
listening
Rock.
to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
There is this, what I got.
It's not just rock and roll.
It's a cam,
It's Holy
but
Joe.
it's all that was out there.
Rock
this
and
movie
roll.
is pretty funny. You know, if you take it as a sort of a funny, as a fun stress relief, it's pretty decent. It's decent. Just take it for that. Just take it as a fun thing, right? It's
You're
like the guy,
listening
your
to
drinking
the
buddy at
Holy
bar just
Joe
telling you
Rock
war
and
stories,
Roll
and
Show.
you know it's a lie.
It's
Okay,
not
but he's
just
your drinking
rock
buddy.
and
You're not gonna go
roll.
into business with him. He's
It's
definitely
Holy
not gonna marry your
Joe.
daughter. So just
Rock
chill,
and roll.
have fun. Jumanji is that kind of movie, okay? Now, Smurfs Lost Village. It's actually pretty cute. Pretty cute. Basically, if you know the Smurfs TV show, the cartoon.
You're
there's all guys
listening
and
to
one
the
girl,
Holy
right?
Joe
Smurfette was
Rock
the
and
only
Roll
woman
Show.
in the Smurfs Village.
It's
So the
not
Lost
just
Village
rock and roll.
Explains
It's
that there
Holy
was another
Joe.
village.
Rock and
Of
roll.
basically all women. Okay, I don't want to give it away. It's great for the kids. Didn't hear any curse words. You know what I mean? There's no blatant or in your face sexuality.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Okay, Smurfs.
It's not just rock and
Two thumbs up
roll.
for the kids. Okay, our
It's
kids like
Holy
it.
Joe.
And that's all
Rock
that
and
counts,
roll.
okay? Now, Roman J. Israel. Sounds like a Jewish movie made in Jewish Hollywood, right? Anyway, starring Denzel Washington. Now look, you know that any
You're
movie that
listening
Denzel is
to the
in,
Holy Joe
up to
Rock
now,
and Roll
has been
Show.
phenomenal. And this
It's
is
not
no
just
exception.
rock and roll.
Roman J. Israel
It's Holy
Esquire.
Joe.
Okay?
Rock and roll.
Denzel plays this lawyer character who basically was sort of like the brains behind the operation, sort of the guy in the back room as a lawyer, where there was another front man who basically was
You're
the public
listening
face of
to the
firm.
Holy Joe
Now, this
Rock
guy
and
was a super
Roll
smart
Show.
dude, but he was basically treated
It's
like
not
a slave. He was
just
only paid
rock
$500
and
a
roll.
month, something like that.
It's
crazy.
Holy Joe.
A little bit of money.
Rock and roll.
Anyhow, the partner who you never see really, he dies of a heart attack, and Roman J. Israel needs money, man. He needs to get on with his life, and
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just
how he
rock
meets
and roll.
Colin Farrell.
It's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
How does he meet the Colin? Oh, I know what it is. The Colin Farrell character, he plays another head of a big law firm that Denzel's boss knew.
You're
very well,
listening
and
to the Holy Joe
Colin
Rock and
talks to
Roll
him. Basically,
Show.
He's taking over the firm, taking over the client.
It's not just rock and
and
roll.
hires
It's Holy
Roman J.
Joe.
Israel.
Rock
Now,
and
Roman
roll.
starts out being this really idealistic character, and he's very idealistic, sort of still wearing the 1960s clothing, still has like the 1960s.
You're
logo,
listening
fro,
to the
right?
Holy Joe
And-
Rock and Roll
and you see
Show.
him make a transition from
It's not
this
just
idealistic,
rock and roll.
altruistic sort of
It's Holy
lawyer who's
Joe.
trying to change the world
Rock and roll.
in a positive way to something a little bit different, but then he realizes that he did wrong, and how does it end? Does it end?
You're
How it
listening
ends.
to the
This is a
Holy
great movie.
Joe
This is
Rock
definitely
and
a great
Roll
movie.
Show.
Definitely a great movie, and you gotta
It's
see it.
not just
all I gotta
rock
say.
and roll.
Roman J. Israel.
It's Holy
Great
Joe.
movie, you gotta see it.
Rock and roll.
Checking the chat for any comments on that. But yeah, definitely a great movie.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
In Poland, but
It's
oh,
not
it's only
just rock and
6:10
roll.
Eastern Standard Time.
It's
right?
Holy Joe.
So
Rock and roll.
what's next is I wish there was a way to just click through these movies without having to go back all the time, but I got to go back to the movies. The next was Molly's
You're
Game.
listening
Okay.
to the Holy
Now,
Joe Rock
I
and
thought this
Roll
was going to be
Show.
about the
It's not just rock and roll.
Mayflower hooker.
It's Holy
hooker
Joe.
scandal where there was
Rock
anyway,
and
that's,
roll.
That's not what this is. Molly's Game is about this professional skier who gets hurt, becomes an entrepreneur, and starts running high-stake poker games. And it just shows you how intense. Not
You're
only these
listening
games are,
to
but
the
all
Holy
the
Joe
politics,
Rock and
the
Roll
jealousy, the
Show.
bullshit.
It's not just rock and
basically,
roll.
these rich people.
It's Holy
most of
Joe.
them,
Rock and
who want to
roll.
gamble, okay, and want to be with other so-called rich people. Great movie, and based on a true story. So, and you can learn a little bit about the law in terms of what you can and can't do.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Like you can't.
It's not just rock and
roll.
You
can't take from the pot.
It's Holy Joe.
Pot, now you're a racketeer.
Rock and roll.
All right. Little tip. I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on TV. Now, Murder on the Orient Express. I'm just being honest.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
To me. Okay, boring
it's not
AF.
just rock and roll.
While the characters were,
it's Holy Joe, rock and roll.
With the with the costumes, like the dude's mustache. I haven't finished this movie, so I got to be honest. I have not finished this movie because to me it was just too boring, and maybe I was just.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Okay, so.
It's not just rock and roll.
My people tell me good things about it.
It's Holy Joe, rock and roll.
So, yeah. Escape Room. Escape Room is what's up next. Now, this is, if you've heard about it,
you're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Where you can go.
It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe,
or rooms,
rock and roll.
And you got to solve puzzles in order to get out of the room. You got to escape from the room, right? That's the game. This is, what would they call this? Like horror, suspense? I don't know what they would call this.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Movies would be.
It's not just rock and roll.
I don't know these other movies.
It's Holy Joe, rock and roll.
This is one of these movies where it doesn't make sense. It's a horror flick. Horror. They say it's horror. It's only got a 43% approval rating. And
you're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
In the end, like, why?
It's not just rock and roll.
So
it's Holy Joe.
That's how I felt about it.
Rock and roll.
Most modern horror is like that. Like it's always some killer killing people. And either it's satanic or some evil thing, and it's just not explained.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
That's what it is, right?
It's not just rock and roll.
Finally,
it's Holy Joe,
which is
rock and roll.
We would have to consider this a latest in the Saw saga. Not only now, since the Saw guy.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
John Kramer, not to be confused with
It's
Bad Money
just
Jim Kramer.
Rock and roll. It's Holy Joe.
Possibly also
rock
as a
and
serial
roll.
Killer if you lost money with Jim Kramer. Anyhow, some people might say that. But all joking aside, this movie here, Jigsaw, is.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Because all of my
it's not just rock and
women
roll.
In my life, either before
it's
or now,
Holy Joe.
They all are into the horror
rock
stuff.
and roll.
This is the first Saw movie, or let's say in that genre, that actually kind of makes sense at the end because you they kind of, even though they sort of told you who was behind this stuff.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
This kind of makes sense, all right. So I would
not
say
just rock and roll.
If you have not seen any of the Saw,
it's Holy
movies,
Joe.
You don't have to see them
rock and roll
to know what it is. You could just go jump right into this and watch this movie. Okay, I actually enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it because of the way they told the story. Okay, I liked it. You know what I mean?
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll
but
Show.
I thought it was an okay movie. Okay?
It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe, rock and roll.
I'm getting a yellow light on the streaming health, and I don't know why that is. Because I got fiber to the curb here, and I shouldn't have any problems here at midnight.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Red, so that's good.
It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe, rock and roll.
Oh, I'm also streaming live to Periscope. So people who are on Periscope, on Twitter, can also see me live there. Just as a short-term experiment.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
Getting, more exposure, okay? That's really what I'm saying. So, where did we leave off? Okay, we just finished Jigsaw. And now, Darkest Hour.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
I watched this entire movie.
It's not just rock and
now,
roll.
If you've seen any documentaries on
it's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
This is basically the story of Winston Churchill at the beginning of World War II and how he rallies the British people to defend themselves and not surrender to the Nazis, as it is.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Or right around
it's
Dunkirk.
Not just rock and roll.
And
it's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
Quite honestly, I mean, look, quite honestly, it was boring AF. It really was. But, if you're into more historical movies and you want to see something
You're listening
decent,
to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
In terms of
it's not just rock and roll.
Real historical.
It's Holy Joe.
How accurate
rock
is
and
it?
roll.
I don't know. And I'm not saying I really care, but it was just okay. Now let's move on to Braven. Braven with Jason.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Momoa.
It's not just rock and roll.
Longer defends his family.
It's Holy Joe.
Dangerous drug
rock and roll.
I would have to call this probably a B movie. I don't know if this is a Netflix movie. I'm not sure. Studio Pride of Gypsies. I'm not sure if this is a Netflix movie or not.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
It's a pretty decent movie. So, if you've seen it on the torrents and you want a pretty decent action movie, it's worth seeing. Definitely worth seeing. Okay.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Yes, rating on that.
It's
now,
not just
Phantom
rock
Thread,
and roll.
I guess last night.
It's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
I'm gonna be honest. I was hesitant on watching this because when you talk about a male dressmaker in his 50s or 60s, however old this guy is supposed to be, I'm thinking.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
The flipping the script of chasing
It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe.
It's nothing
rock
like that.
And roll.
It's nothing like that. It's actually probably a good date flick, unless, caveat. If your girlfriend or your wife ever said something about poisoning you, or something about their grandmother teaching them.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
You make a tea with and poison
it's
your
not
ass.
Just rock and roll.
Then definitely don't
it's Holy
go to
Joe.
This movie, all right?
Rock and roll.
Definitely don't go to or anything like that. Like your girlfriend said that she would kill you if you left her or anything like that. Probably don't want to take your girlfriend to this movie, all right? But otherwise,
you're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Decent.
It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
World War II, London. Anyway, that's what it is. You've got this guy who is a dressmaker, who's like, I don't know, some super high-end designer sort of dressmaker for women.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Has a revolving door for these women.
It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
A young, strong, willed woman, and she, great actress, great role that she played. And Alma is her name.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
I guess.
It's not just rock and roll.
You might think she's playing
It's
Jane,
Holy Joe.
She actually is
rock and roll.
All right. Anyway, definitely 2 thumbs up on that Phantom Thread. Now, Den of Thieves. Den of Thieves reminded me of Heat. Remember Heat?
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll.
In the same movie at once.
It's Holy Joe.
Reminds me of that.
Rock and roll.
It's not like that. It's basically, well, what they say is while planning a bank heist, a thief gets trapped between 2 sets of criminals. and they probably should put criminals in quotes.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
That's what it is.
It's not just rock and roll.
Just sort of reminded me of
It's Holy Joe.
Heat.
Rock and roll.
Sort of the feel. Good acting. Good. This Gerard Butler. I've seen him on a bunch of other stuff. I mean, really good stuff. And
you're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Hit roll, medium,
it's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe.
Where's the other actor?
Rock and roll.
Where's that guy, man, in the cast? Is it?
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Anyway,
it's not just rock and roll.
Maybe it isn't.
It's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
There's whatever. Definitely a lot of twists and turns in this movie, and I would recommend it. It's definitely fun to watch. It's definitely a good movie. Good, decent.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
Hang on, let me just get into Periscope.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
Definitely worth watching. Let's go back.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe. Rock and roll. You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
Just checking. I should do this. Where is it?
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Wheelman.
It's not just rock and roll.
And
it's Holy Joe. Rock and roll.
You're definitely gonna like Wheelman. Wheelman is a great flick, and this is a really strong on.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
80% of the film takes place in
it's not just rock and roll.
Maybe not quite 80%, but
it's Holy Joe.
Let's say 80%.
Rock and roll.
And the dialogue is super strong, man. This is a really good flick. I think anybody's gonna like it. Okay? Wheelman is definitely a good movie. Now, thank you for your service.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
This is also from 2017.
It's not just rock and roll.
Really about
it's Holy Joe
and what has
happened. Rock and roll.
For these veterans from Afghanistan and Iraq that come back with traumatic brain injury and other issues because of what they witnessed there, what they went through.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
The Trump administration, I'm told that
it's not just rock and roll.
The VA is cut in half.
It's Holy Joe.
Veterans are getting
rock and roll.
A lot of them are getting taken care of much quicker. I know my dad, who's a veteran, he went to the VA in his area and he got seen right away that same day. So that's just, I don't.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Previously. Anyway,
it's not just rock and roll.
This movie really should be called hashtag
It's Holy Joe.
Israel.
Rock and roll.
But anyhow, it's worthwhile seeing. Thank you for your service. And really, if you can help a vet in whatever way you can, 22 per day are committing suicide or
you're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe.
Really,
rock and roll.
If there's anything you can do to help it, little things, can really mean a lot to these people, because they've gone through a lot. They sacrificed a lot for the country, for the United States. Anyway,
you're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
Hashtag no more wars.
It's not just rock and roll.
Trying to brew up a war.
It's Holy Joe Rock and Roll,
and obviously with Russia and Syria. So let's hope that Trump is smart enough not to fall for it. So far, he's been pretty strong. Yeah, he did fire some cruise missiles.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show.
We know now.
It's not just rock and roll.
That it was not the.
It's Holy Joe Rock and Roll.
So let's move on to the Snowman 2017. The Snowman. Whoops! No, I don't want to play this movie. This is a horror flick. I guess a thriller.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll.
Before he kills
it's Holy Joe Rock and Roll.
That is really terrible, man. I'm sorry. I even tested this, man. Thanks Magda W. Sorry about that. 26 minutes in, you guys have been hearing that loop. You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. I apologize. I do apologize. I tested this beforehand with my headphones on, and then I forgot to turn off that freaking thing, man. Thank you for that. That's not good, man. I might have to scrap this video and start over. Hopefully you can hang in there. 26 minutes in, it gets better. So, yeah. A snowman is about a serial killer who places snowmen around the victim. Okay, and it's actually not that good of a movie. I gotta be honest with you. I think it takes place in Norway. Yeah, in Norway, and honestly, I didn't find it a very compelling drama. You know, it's very predictable. The only mystery is who was the kid. Who did they show this kid and the situation of this kid? Who did the kid grow up to be? That's the only sort of mystery that you don't find out until the end. Okay, and then it's very predictable. So I would just give it one thumb up. It's worth seeing, but it just wasn't that good. Now, The Fate of the Furious, of course, this is a continuation of the Fast and the Furious franchise with Vin Diesel and John Stratham and Dwayne Johnson, Tyrese Gibson, Ludacris, I guess, and what was that, Michelle Rodriguez? Honestly, Michelle Rodriguez, what's the big deal? She's not good looking. I mean, she's not that good looking. She looks short and scrawny. I'm guessing she has a fat ass, but I could be wrong. I mean, whatever. I don't know why she's. I mean, could they pick somebody else, just as Diesel but better looking? Because, whatever. I'm not liking it. I'm not liking her in this whatever. Like, come on. Vin Diesel can't get a better looking girlfriend. Hey Archie, what's going on, man? Yeah, it is cold here, by the way. It is cold in Poland. It has been minus 15 degrees, minus 10 degrees Celsius. So that's like 15. Yeah, it's like 15 degrees Fahrenheit, 13 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's obviously like you would say 20 degrees below zero in Fahrenheit, right? Because it is 20 degrees below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which is freezing. So we don't get the freeze. Well, yeah, 0 degrees. Hang on, what the heck? That doesn't make sense, man. Yeah, it's minus 0 degrees centigrade is already 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's darn cold here. Sorry for that digression. My friend Archie just asked me a question. But The Fate of the Furious, I mean, I actually kind of was able to suspend my disbelief up until the very end, and you see it in this picture here. What looks like a submarine busting through the ice. And, you know, that's when this movie just gets totally fake. So fakety fake that, like, if any, you know, it's, when you're smart and you know stuff, it's hard to suspend your disbelief. Like, you know, a nuclear submarine, even an Alpha class Soviet era submarine, is not going to go 100 miles an hour while breaking through ice sheets. It's just that you can drive on. Okay, it's just not going to happen. I mean, even with if there is no ice sheets, it's not going to go that fast. And that's what makes this whole movie kind of, you know, ridiculous, like a comic book movie. But it's okay. I mean, it's okay if you want to enjoy yourself, have some fun, right? I could say it's okay. It's okay to watch if you're into that, or you want to just know what was the fate of the Furious, okay? Now, Accident Man, this is from 2018. I have to say, it looks like a B movie. I don't know where this came from. Link Entertainment. It's, you know, as it says here, Mike Fallon, the Accident Man, is a stone cold killer. You know, basically he kills his victims by making it look like an accident. And when one of his loved one is murdered, I don't want to go into the details, he has to seek revenge on the people who did it. Okay? So that's what this movie is about. And it's not bad. Accident Man, it's not bad. It's just it's okay. It's actually okay. And there's a lot of funny stuff in here, like English humor. I guess it takes place in America, but no, it takes place in England, because there is an American there pretending to be like an English gentleman. That's right. So it's probably taking place in London. It's decent. I mean, it's decent. Accident Man, pretty good. There's some funny stuff in there. But it's not meant to be funny. It's meant to be kind of whatever. Now, Renegades, this is 2017, says that a team of Navy SEALs discover an underground treasure in a Bosnian lake, and this is supposedly during the American involvement in Serbia, when supposedly Miloslav, whatever, was ethnically cleansing the Bosnian Serbs. Okay, pure fantasy. Okay, but pretty decent movie. You know what I mean? You know, again, one of these is or maybe several of these are maybe Netflix movies from a Netflix studios, and they're actually pretty decent movies. You know, you would probably say they're like a B movie, and not even talking about the special effects or anything like that, but just sort of the overall quality. But that was a really good movie quality wise, and pretty decent overall. Okay, worth seeing. Renegades. Now, The Mountain Between Us, you know, I was whatever, I was a little bit reluctant to see this. What is this interracial love story, blah blah blah, but actually the actors, even Kate Winslet, did a really good job, and Idris Elba, who plays the male actor, actually was pretty decent. Pretty decent movie. Essentially, it's, you know, not giving it away. It kind of tells you here, you know, these two people are in a plane crash and they're stranded in the middle of nowhere, and basically no one's coming to rescue them. And after a few days, they gotta move on. And it just talks about the adventure and what happens, because they really deep down believe they're going to die. So it's kind of like a survival movie, but that also, you know, I mean, I don't want to give it away, but it's basically there's a love story, love element in there, and it occurs really organically. So it's not something forced, where, you know, maybe in the past there was sort of these forced, you know, interracial relationships kind of forced on you by Hollywood. Look, maybe you might think differently. Maybe you think this is forced on you, right? Why does this guy have to be black? Why does she have to be white? But it adds to the sort of a little bit adds to the suspense of the movie, and it's It's a good movie. It's actually I thought it was a good movie. Now, The Foreigner, Jackie Chan, is it's the same formula story. Super special agent, spy, dude, Chinaman, lives modestly in London, and something happens to his daughter, and he takes revenge. All right. I mean, come on. We've seen this over and over again, but Pierce Brosnan is in it, and it's not your typical. It's the same sort of story, but with a twist. And I have to say, I'll give it 2 thumbs up. Jackie Chan is looking pretty damn old, but he's still performing really well, I would say. Speaking about old people, Liam Neeson, who I think is now 65, I think he's 65, but he's still a big dude, still looking pretty big, for his age, still looking strong. This is really a psychological thriller in many ways. So they call it an action crime movie. Only 56%, I guess, thumbs up. I would definitely give it 2 thumbs up. In Poland, it's known as Passenger. It's the movie posters were Passenger, so I was looking for Passenger because that's also an English word. But I guess the original title was The Commuter, and that was translated into Polish as The Passenger, or just Passenger. I guess there is no Polish word for commuter. I don't know. Is there? Archie, is there a word for commuter? I mean, how would you call it? All right, doesn't really matter. The commuter, man. Yeah, Jackie Chan supposedly did his own stunts, so as for that age of a man, it's pretty good. But yeah, so this movie is actually pretty decent. I mean, except look, I'm watching it with my wife. We get close to the end, and she basically just goes to sleep. And I was like, "Don't go to sleep. I don't want to have to tell you what happens. It's almost over." But she really loves this guy, Liam Neeson, in terms of his acting. All of the Taken movies, she just loves it. And she was really tired, and she just collapsed. So the ending is far-fetched, okay? The ending is totally far-fetched in terms of the whole conspiracy and what happens, but it's a good movie. You know what I mean? It's definitely, maybe I can't give it. Look, if you got something crappy to watch this instead. It's pretty reasonably good. So I'll give it definitely 1.5 thumbs up, maybe not 2 thumbs up, only because of the ending. It was just crazy, man. Commuter. Now, Bullethead. Man, this was actually a pretty freaking crazy ass movie. 2017, only a 43%, star rating. Now, I'm not sure where this is coming from. I don't think it's coming from Smashed Tomatoes or whatever, but Millennium Films. Anthony Banderas is in here. John Malkovich is in here. Adrian Brody, who didn't he get a? He got something good, man. He got something good. Academy Award for The Pianist. So some really good actors in here. The Handler, yeah, some really good actors in this movie, and yeah. So I'll just read to you what the summary is, because this is what it is. I don't want to give it away. You got to watch this movie. Excuse me. A group of career criminals finds itself trapped in a warehouse with the law and an attack dog named De Niro closing in. All right. I was compelled to watch this. I was, I was wanting to know what the heck was going to happen next. So that was really a good movie. Now I'm going to skip over Marshall, and I'm going to go to Black Panther real quick. Okay. Now, I had really low expectations on Black Panther. And, you know, because it was so hyped about being this great movie. It's pretty much an all African-American cast or all black cast. There's a couple of white guys in there, a couple of white people, I guess. Look, if you take this, look, all of the hype around Wakanda and this Black Paradise, you know, it's just all nonsense, just social justice warrior nonsense. This movie is actually pretty decent. It is stupid. I mean, the story is stupid in many respects, but it's decent. And look, I mean, one of the ways that it's stupid, I'll tell you, is that the main antagonist, I don't want to give it away. Yeah, I can't give it away, but he, you know, listen to how he talks. Listen to how he acts. Okay? You know, it's just whatever. You know, if the movie was supposed to set aside racial stereotypes, it certainly relies on racial stereotypes to tell the story. And that's number one. Number two, you know, no one who's black or African American or even African should hold this movie up as proof of black anything. It's a comic book. It's totally fictional. There is no Wakanda. There is no advanced civilization in Africa. There never was. At least, you know, you want to include Egypt, but they weren't Africans, so to speak. They were Africans because they were on the continent of Africa, but there is no evidence that the Egyptians were African as in black. Okay? It's nothing about race. It's just a fact. Okay? The Nubians were to the south. Queen Cleopatra was not black African. She was Egyptian or possibly even Greek. Okay? Or maybe even Phoenician. So, anyway, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is, it's just a joke movie. There's a lot of fighting in there, and almost too much fighting. Yeah. Uganda, you got that right. So it was really a letdown. I mean, the special effects were awesome. The idea that there is some city, state, country in sub-Saharan Africa that is basically like Hong Kong and Singapore combined with the wealth of, well, maybe not the wealth of China, but like the technological advancement of Atlantis. And it's just like, if these people are so smart and so advanced, why would they fight? Why would the transition for the next king be a fight to the death? Wouldn't it be an IQ test? You know what I'm saying? Wouldn't it be something along those lines? That's what I'm saying. It sort of rubbed me the wrong way. But in terms of artistic expression, in terms of, was it a decent movie? Yeah, it was pretty decent. It was pretty okay. It was pretty decent. As far as comic book movies go, okay? Now, in my opinion, what blacks should be celebrating is this movie, Marshall. Okay? Now, Marshall is one story in Thurgood Marshall, Thurgood Marshall's life. He is a lawyer, an African-American, a black American, a lawyer, who became the first African-American Supreme Court Justice. Okay? And this is one of the battles that he had to fight in his career. It's a career-defining case, okay? And it also does show the Jewish-Black alliance through the NAACP, but also in the selection of this Sam Friedman, this Jewish lawyer, to sort of represent this defendant, along with Thurgood Marshall, because since Thurgood wasn't from Connecticut, was not a licensed lawyer in Connecticut, he had to get somebody local that would bring him in. But it does sort of expose sort of the racism and the true discrimination that was in America back in the, when is this, late 50s? Early 60s when this takes place? And that sort of discrimination does not exist today has not existed in America for decades, and that's a good thing, okay? And part of what Thurgood Marshall did was defend innocent blacks in America, and this is the story that people should be celebrating. That's all I'm trying to say, right? Because this is reality. This is reality. This is a real person who, real smart black man who, you know, became a lawyer, a civil rights attorney, and battled his way defending people and made it to the Supreme Court. And he is somebody who has, I mean, really a stellar reputation even to this day. Whereas guys like Martin Luther King Jr., not so good reputation in terms of what he really did, you know, in his personal life. We don't have to get into that, but this is a great movie, Marshall, about Thurgood Marshall, and 73% is considered a drama. So this is a good movie, and I think, you know, just to contrast that with the Black Panther. Black Panther is just pure fantasy. It's fiction. It's a comic book. Never happened. Never will happen. Whereas Marshall is something that people should really be. I'm really surprised that no one brought that up, right? As the compare and contrast sort of situation. So that is my review, my set of reviews for this time, for March of 2018. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 times, almost 27 movies that are available. And how did I find these on the torrents? I think it was more than just popping at the top 100. I think I might have, I forget exactly, but these are all on the torrents, and all of them except for this Jumanji were very decent quality, or really good quality. The Jumanji, and I got it 2 months ago, was kind of not so good quality. But otherwise, help us defund Hollywood by using the torrents for your entertainment, right? Use the torrents, because information wants to be free, right? So that's really it. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll be back very soon with updates on some of the other more political content. I'm in the middle of some serious other work right now, so I've not been able to keep up as often as possible. But this has been sitting on the back burner now that everybody's sleeping. 12:49. I was able to get some time to put this together. So again, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This is Holy Joe Rock and Roll. Remember to always make it happen for the captain, because you're the captain. And I apologize for the technical problems we had at the beginning. Let's make America great again, people. Booyah.
You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe Rock and Roll. You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe Rock and Roll. You're listening to the Holy Joe Rock and Roll Show. It's not just rock and roll. It's Holy Joe Rock and Roll.